He grew up in a small town where nothing surprising ever happened. People woke up, went to work, talked about the weather, and lived the same routines almost every day. In the middle of that quiet town lived a boy who rarely spoke and kept mostly to himself. He wasn't unfriendly. He just never had the right words. Most people didn't pay much attention to him, and he didn't expect them to. He was used to being unnoticed. But there was something inside him, something he didn't know how to show to the world. He lived with his family in a modest house near the edge of town. The house wasn't old, but it carried the smell of memories and worries. His parents worked hard to keep things together, and they didn't have much extra money for anything that wasn't essential. He understood that from a young age. He never asked for toys, stylish clothes, or anything that seemed unnecessary. When he wanted something, he learned to make do with whatever he could find. One afternoon, while wandering through the town's small weekend market, he stumbled upon an old guitar lying next to a table full of dusty books and mismatched kitchen items. The guitar didn't look like much. Its wood was scratched, the neck was slightly bent, and most of its strings were missing or loose. But he couldn't look away from it. Something about it felt like a forgotten story waiting to be told. The seller, an older man with gentle eyes, noticed the boy staring at the guitar. "You like that thing?" the seller asked, with a small smile. "It's been here for months. No one wants it." The boy picked it up carefully, almost like he was afraid it would fall apart in his hands. He plucked one of the remaining strings. The sound was dull and uneven, but to him, it felt warm, almost familiar. He asked the price even though he barely had any money. The seller thought for a moment and said, "Give me whatever you have in your pocket. Better someone plays it than it gathers more dust." The boy emptied his pocket. It was almost nothing, just a few coins he had saved from doing small errands. The seller took the coins with a smile and said, "It's yours now." He carried the broken guitar home like it was something precious. When he reached his room, he sat on the floor and examined it closely. It had only one string that was still somewhat usable. The others were too damaged to tighten or tune. Most people would have thrown it away, but he didn't want to. He wanted to learn, even if it seemed impossible. He didn't need a perfect instrument. He needed something to hold on to. In the evenings, after finishing his chores, he would lock himself in his small room and sit with the guitar. He didn't know the names of chords or the proper way to hold the instrument. He only had that one working string and a lot of curiosity. He would pluck the string gently, listening to every tiny vibration. Sometimes the sound was sharp, sometimes soft, sometimes shaky, but he never grew tired of that one note. In a strange way, it felt like the guitar was speaking to him. He tried different ways of pressing the string, sliding his finger up and down the neck, exploring how the tone changed. He didn't expect anyone to understand why he spent so much time with an almost worthless guitar. He wasn't even sure he understood it himself. It just made him feel calm, like the world made sense when that one note echoed softly in his room at school. He wasn't the kind of student people remembered. He sat in the back of the class, kept his head down, and answered only when asked. Some classmates teased him for being quiet, but he never fought back. He simply let their words pass by him like passing clouds. He had learned long ago that not everyone needed to like him, but something changed whenever he came home and sat with his guitar. It felt like the only place where his voice existed. Even though he wasn't singing and barely playing, that single note helped him express things he couldn't explain out loud. His family didn't understand it at first. His younger relatives laughed when they saw him holding the broken guitar, asking why he didn't just buy a new one. He simply smiled and said he liked this one. His parents didn't say much either. They often peeked into his room and saw him sitting with the guitar and thought he had found a harmless hobby, something that kept him busy. Weeks turned into months, and he slowly became better at controlling that one note. He learned to bend it, stretch it, soften it, and even make small rhythmic patterns. He didn't know any music theory, but he had something rare patience. He practiced every single day, even when he felt tired, even when nothing sounded right. He didn't chase perfection. He chased understanding. The town's annual talent show was approaching, something everyone looked forward to. Families prepared dances, skits, and songs. Local performers practiced after school in the community hall. Posters were placed around town announcing the event. Everyone talked about it except him. He never imagined himself standing on a stage in front of people. The thought alone made him nervous. Crowds made him uncomfortable, and the idea of performing something so simpler, single note, felt almost embarrassing. But one evening, while practicing, he accidentally created a sound that even surprised him. It was the same note he had played thousands of times before, but this time the vibration carried a softness that felt emotional. It's almost like a whisper of a story. Someone heard it. His neighbor, an older woman who lived next door, paused near his slightly open window. She closed her eyes as she listened. She had heard him practice before, but something about this sound touched her. When he finished, she gently tapped the window frame. "That sounded beautiful," she said softly. He froze, not expecting anyone to notice. "It's just one note," he replied shyly. "It's not about how many notes you play," she said. "It's about how you make people feel." He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him long after she walked away. That night, as he lay in bed, he kept thinking about the talent show. He imagined himself sitting on the stage with his broken guitar. He imagined people staring, whispering, maybe even laughing. But he also imagined the possibility, just a small one, that someone out there might feel something when they heard that single note. For the first time in his life, the idea of being seen didn't feel frightening. It felt like an opportunity. The next day at school, he overheard students talking excitedly about their performances. Some planned to sing, others were preparing dance routines. A group of boys had formed a small band. He listened quietly, unsure if he should join. He wasn't sure if a single-note performance even counted as music, but when he got home, picked up the guitar and played the note again. This time it felt stronger, clearer, like it was asking him to take a chance. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Maybe the world didn't need to understand him. Maybe he just needed to show them who he was. He decided he would join the talent show. He filled out the entry form at the community center. The person in charge looked at him with mild surprise because he had never participated before. "What will you be performing?" the person asked. "Guitar," he said simply. The person nodded and wrote it down without asking for details. He was grateful for that. He didn't want to explain that he only had one note to play. In the days leading up to the show, he practiced even more. The string occasionally slipped out of tune, but he adjusted it carefully each time. He cleaned the guitar as best as he could, wiping away dust and making sure it wouldn't fall apart on stage. Even though the guitar looked old and worn, he treated it like something valuable. Every evening, he played the note over and over again, searching for the right feeling. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just wanted to be honest. He wanted the sound to carry all the quiet. Thoughts he never said out loud. His neighbor noticed his effort and sometimes stood by her window listening. She didn't interrupt him again. She didn't need to. Her silent support was enough. The night before the talent show, he couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, looking at the moonlight reflecting off the guitar's scratched surface. He thought about how unusual his performance would be. No chords, no melody, no fancy techniques, just a single note played with everything inside him. He wondered if people would laugh. He wondered if anyone would understand. But deep down, he felt something calm and steady growing inside him. For once, he wasn't thinking about fear. He was thinking about the music. He brushed his fingers across the string one last time before bed. The soft vibration filled the room, and he closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would step onto a stage for the first time in his life. Tomorrow, he would share the only sound he truly knew. He didn't know what would happen. He only knew he was ready. He woke up earlier than usual the morning after signing up for the talent show. His room was still dim, with only a thin line of sunlight touching the floor. For a moment, he forgot about the decision he had made. But then it all returned at once: the talent show, the stage, the crowd, and his one-note performance. His stomach tightened with nerves, but he reminded himself that he had already taken the first step by signing the form. Turning back now would feel worse than facing whatever waited ahead. The house was quiet. His family had already left for work or school, leaving him alone in the silence. He sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the guitar resting on his small desk. Even though it was old and worn, It felt like a friend that had stayed with him through every quiet moment of his life. The single functioning string glimmered faintly in the morning light. He picked up the guitar and let his fingers run down the neck. The surface was uneven, and the wood had scratches everywhere, but he didn't mind any of it. The flaws made it feel real. He plucked the string softly, letting the note ring through his room. It wasn't loud, but it filled the silence in a warm way. The sound helped him breathe easier. He didn't need a full melody or complicated music. He just needed that one note to remind him why he started as he practiced. He tried different ways of pressing and sliding his finger. Over time, he had learned how to make tiny changes that affected the tone. Sometimes he could make it sound sad, other times hopeful. Sometimes he could make it sound like a quiet question with no answer. He played slowly, trying to recreate the calming sound he once made by accident, the sound his neighbor had heard and praised. But recreating it wasn't always easy. Some days the note felt empty no matter how he played it. Other days it felt full of emotion without him even trying. Today, it was somewhere in between. He practiced for hours, stopping only when his fingers felt sore. But he didn't mind the discomfort. It felt like progress. It felt like effort turning into something meaningful. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside to get some fresh air. The town was lively as usual. People walked by carrying bags of groceries, kids rode bicycles, and shop owners greeted customers with friendly smiles. Nobody knew what he was preparing for. Nobody knew he would soon stand on a stage and show them something they might not understand. But the thought didn't scare him as much as before. He walked past the small bakery, where warm bread always filled the air with a comforting smell. He passed the schoolyard where younger kids were laughing and shouting. He passed the community center where the talent show would take place. Seeing it made his heart race, but he forced himself to keep walking. He didn't want to stand there and imagine the worst. When he returned home, he found the neighbor, who had once heard his practice, sitting outside her porch. She waved at him gently, and he lifted his hand to wave back. She didn't mention the talent show, even though she somehow knew he was going to be part of it. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, not with pity, but with trust. He went back to his room and practiced again until evening. Each time he played, he imagined himself on the stage. He pictured the lights shining on him, the crowd watching, the silence before he played the first sound. Sometimes he imagined the audience laughing. Other times he imagined someone in the crowd closing their eyes and listening quietly. Moved by the simplicity of his music, his heart told him to focus on that person, the one who might understand. When night came, his family gathered in the living room to watch a show on TV. He joined them, trying to distract himself from the growing pressure in his chest. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind kept going back to the guitar resting in his room. His mother noticed how distracted he seemed. "You okay?" she asked kindly. He hesitated before nodding. He wanted to tell her about the talent show, but feared she might think his idea was strange or pointless. He didn't want judgment. He wanted encouragement, even a small amount. She didn't press further. She simply patted his arm lightly and went back to watching the TV, giving him silent comfort. Later, when everyone had gone to sleep, he returned to his room. The moonlight shone through the thin curtains, creating a soft glow across the floor. He sat near the window and held the guitar close. He played the note again, the sound mixing with the quiet night air. There was something peaceful about playing when the world was asleep. It made him feel like he was part of something bigger and gentler. The next day, he carried the guitar to a small repair shop. He had no money to pay for repairs, but he wanted to know if anything could be done. The shop owner, a thoughtful man with hands worn from years of fixing instruments, examined the guitar carefully. "This guitar has lived a long life," the shop owner said with a gentle chuckle. "But it's not beyond hope. I can try to tighten the body and adjust the neck. It won't make it perfect, but it'll hold together better." The boy nodded and looked down, embarrassed about not being able to afford repairs. The shop owner seemed to understand. "Don't worry about the money," he said softly. "Just let me do what I can." The boy was surprised. "Why?" he asked quietly. The man smiled. "Because sometimes effort deserves a chance, and I can see you've put a lot of effort into this." He thanked the man and left the guitar at the shop. For the first time, he walked home empty-handed. His hands felt strange without the weight of the guitar, but his heart felt full. The next few days were long. Without the guitar, he had nothing to practice, nothing to focus on. He spent his time imagining how the repaired guitar might feel in his hands. He imagined the note sounding clearer, warmer, stronger. He hoped the shop owner could save the instrument without changing its soul. He didn't want it to sound too new or too perfect. He wanted it to sound like it always had, simple and honest. On the third day, he returned to the repair shop. The shop owner smiled when he saw him. "It's ready," he said. The boy held the guitar carefully and plucked the single remaining string. The note was sharper, brighter, but still familiar. The guitar felt more solid, more dependable. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Play well," the man replied as he walked home. He felt more prepared than ever. That evening he practiced non-stop. The improved guitar helped him feel the sound more deeply. The note carried more emotion now, more weight. It was still just one note, but it felt alive. While practicing, he heard footsteps outside his room. His father peeked inside. "You're playing again?" his father said softly. He nodded. His father walked in slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. "That guitar? It sounds nicer than before," his father added. The boy didn't know what to say, but he smiled shyly. After a moment, his father asked, "Are you getting ready for something?" He hesitated but finally answered, "For the talent show." His father looked surprised at first, but then his expression softened into pride. "I didn't know you wanted to perform," his father said. "That takes courage." "I don't know if I should," the boy admitted. "It's just one note." His father shook his head gently. "It doesn't matter how many notes you play. What matters is how much heart you put into it, and I think you have plenty." His father's words touched him. He felt a warmth grow inside, the kind that stayed long after the moment passed. When the day of the talent show drew closer, he felt nervous but determined. He didn't want to impress anyone. He just wanted to share what he had learned. He wanted people to understand that even something as simple as a single note could have meaning. The night before the show, he sat quietly with the guitar and played until he felt calm. The note echoed through the room like a soft promise. He closed his eyes and let the sound settle inside him. Tomorrow, he thought, everything would reveal itself. He didn't know if the audience would understand him or laugh at him. He didn't know if he would freeze on stage or play better than ever, but none of that mattered anymore. He was ready to tell his story not with words, but with the one note he had learned to shape with patience, struggle, and heart. The morning of the talent show arrived with a strange mix of excitement and fear. He woke up earlier than usual, long before the sun had fully risen. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the faint glow on the ceiling. His heart beat faster than normal, reminding him of what the day held. The talent show, the stage, the people. In his one note, he sat up slowly, taking a deep breath. His room felt unusually quiet, even though it was always quiet. Today, the silence felt heavy, almost like it was watching him. He looked over at his guitar resting against the wall. The repaired wood and single shining string almost looked hopeful. He picked it up gently, as though he was afraid to disturb its peace. He plucked the string once. The note rang clear and steady. It calmed him for a moment. He played it again, then again, slowly finding comfort in the repetition. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled the room with a soft warmth. He practiced for a while, not trying to perfect anything, just reminding himself of the connection he had built with that note over the months. When he went to the kitchen, his parents were already awake. His father gave him a quiet nod, and his mother placed a warm piece of bread on a plate for him. She didn't say much, but the gentle smile she gave him told him she knew it was an important day. He ate slowly, feeling his stomach twist with nerves between every bite. After breakfast, he went back to his room, sat on his bed, and held the guitar once more. He thought about the stage, the lights, the people whispering, the eyes staring at him as he played something so simple. Would they understand? Would they laugh? Would anyone feel what he felt when that single note echoed in the air? He didn't know, and that uncertainty made his chest tighten. Time passed faster than he expected. Soon, it was afternoon, and he had to leave for the community center. He carried the guitar carefully in his hands, making sure it didn't bump into anything. As he stepped outside, the cool air brushed against his face. He took a deep breath and began walking. Along the way, he saw families heading in the same direction. Children practiced dance steps while walking. Some teens carried props or instruments, talking loudly about their performances. Everyone seemed excited, confident, full of energy. He walked quietly among them, unnoticed and unseen, just like usual. But today it felt different. Today he wasn't just watching. He was going to be part of it. When he reached the community center, the building buzzed with noise. The entrance was decorated with handmade banners, balloons, and posters listing the schedule of performers. People crowded around the sign-in table. Volunteers hurried back and forth, trying to keep everything organized. He stood there for a moment, taking in the scene. It felt overwhelming, like stepping into a world louder and brighter than he was used to. A volunteer noticed him and smiled kindly. "You're here to perform?" she asked. He nodded. "Just sign here," she said, handing him a clipboard. "Your turn will come later in the evening. Just stay nearby, okay?" He signed his name quietly and stepped aside. He found a corner in the hallway where he could sit with his guitar. From there, he could see people moving in and out of the main hall. He heard laughter, conversations, last-minute rehearsals, and the occasional off-key singing. Instead of feeling intimidated, he felt strangely calm. He had nothing complicated to prepare, nothing to adjust, nothing to tune except one string. While he waited, he watched other performers go through their routines. Some practiced dance moves in the hallway. Some sang with their friends, cheering them on. A group of boys tuned their guitars together, the sound filling the hallway with bright, busy chords. When they noticed his broken guitar, some of them exchanged looks, but no one said anything. He kept his eyes down and focused on his fingers. The show started with loud applause. From behind the curtain, he could hear the host greeting the audience with jokes and energy. The first performers danced to upbeat music, and the crowd cheered loudly. Another group performed a comedy skit that made everyone laugh. Some performers sang with strong, confident voices, earning whistles and applause. Each time the curtain opened and closed, the excitement grew. So did the pressure inside him. His hands began to shake a little. He held the guitar tighter, trying to steady himself as the evening went on. A stage assistant walked down the hallway, calling names. "You're next. Be ready." Performers hurried into place. His heart pounded harder each time a name was called. He knew his turn was getting closer. Finally, the assistant stopped in front of him. "You're coming up soon?" she said gently. He nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans before standing. His legs felt weak, but he took a slow breath to steady himself. The assistant guided him to the side of the stage, where the lights felt warm and the sound of the crowd vibrated through the floor. He peeked out a bit and saw rows of people watching with eager faces. A group had just finished a lively drum performance. The audience clapped loudly as they bowed and left the stage. The host returned with a grin, hyping up the energy in the room. And now the host said, "Our next performer. Someone new to our show this year?" Hearing those words sent a wave of nerves through him. His heart thumped in his ears. He'll be sharing a simple but heartfelt guitar piece. Please welcome him. There was polite applause, not too loud, not too quiet. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights felt brighter than he expected. The stage temperature rose quickly under their heat. His palms became sweaty. He could see the silhouettes of people watching, though their faces were blurred by the brightness. Some leaned forward. Some whispered. Some looked confused when they saw the old guitar with only one string. He heard a few soft chuckles from somewhere in the crowd, but he didn't let himself focus on any of that. He walked to the center of the stage, gently placed the stool upright, and sat down. He positioned the guitar on his lap, adjusting it carefully. For a moment, closed his eyes and took another slow breath. The hall fell silent. He opened his eyes and looked at the single string. The metal glimmered under the light. It didn't look impressive or powerful, but it was his. It held months of effort, patience, frustration, and hope. He lifted his hand and plucked the string. A single note echoed through the hall. It was soft at first. It's almost fragile, but it carried across the room. Some people shifted in their seats. Others raised their eyebrows. The silence grew heavier. He plucked the string again, slightly differently, adding a gentle bend with his finger. The tone changed, warmer, quieter, deeper. He focused entirely on the sound, feeling it through his fingertips. The audience didn't know what to expect. Some whispered, some waited with confusion. But slowly, as he repeated the note in a pattern he had practiced countless times, the hall began to shift. He closed his eyes and let himself slip into the feeling of the note. His fingers moved with steady confidence, bending and sliding the string to create small shifts in tone. The note vibrated softly, like a heartbeat or a quiet message. He didn't rush. He didn't try to impress. He simply played what he felt. And slowly, the audience fell silent. Not the polite silence from before, but a true, deep silence. People leaned forward. Some lifted their hands away from their faces, surprised by the emotion hidden inside that single sound. The hall grew warmer with the soft echo of the note bouncing off the walls. The note wasn't loud. It wasn't complex. But it had soul. It carried something raw and honest, something that made people stop and listen. Someone in the front row lowered their phone, no longer recording, simply watching. A child stopped swinging their legs. Even the host, standing backstage, folded his arms and watched with a curious expression. He kept playing, letting the soft rhythm guide him. Each time he plucked the string, he shifted the tone slightly, creating a quiet pattern full of emotion. It wasn't a melody. It wasn't a song. It was a feeling, and every person in that hall felt it. The boy's nervousness slowly faded away. Instead, he felt calmer than he had ever felt in his life. The note flowed through him like a quiet voice he didn't know he had. The world outside the sound disappeared. He lost track of time. He didn't know if he played for a minute or 5. He only stopped when the note naturally faded after one last gentle pluck. He looked up. The entire hall was silent. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. People stared at him with wide eyes, not in confusion, not in mockery, but in a deep, stunned stillness. He felt the air around him shift, as though the whole room had taken a breath together. Then, from the middle of the audience, someone started clapping. One clap, then another, then another. Suddenly, the entire hall erupted into applause. People cheered. Some stood. Some clapped slowly with emotion. Some shook their heads in disbelief. They weren't cheering for a complicated performance. They weren't cheering for a flashy routine. They were cheering because he had made them feel something real. He sat there on the stool for a moment, stunned. He had expected whispers or laughter. He had never expected this. He slowly stood up, his legs shaky again, but this time for a different reason. He bowed his head slightly, unsure of how to respond to such loud applause as he walked off the stage. The sound of the audience followed him like a warm wave. Behind the curtain, the host met him with wide, astonished eyes. "I've never seen anything like that," the host whispered. He didn't know how to answer. He just nodded lightly and held his guitar close. In that moment, he realized something. People hadn't heard a single note. They had heard his heart. And for the first time in his life, the world had listened. The week after the small gathering felt different for him. It was like something invisible had shifted inside him. He still woke up at the same time, still prepared his tea the same way, still walked to the same corner of his house where he kept his old guitar. But now there was a small spark in his steps. It wasn't confidence exactly, but it also wasn't the doubt he carried for years. It was something in between, something soft and new. He kept thinking about the moment when he played that single note and how everyone stared at him. Not in confusion or judgment, but with curiosity and respect. He replayed that moment again and again in his mind, as if trying to understand why it mattered so much. Maybe it wasn't the note, he told himself. Maybe it was the courage to play it at all. One morning, he looked at the guitar and quietly whispered to himself, "Let's try again." Sat down, rested the instrument on his knee, and gently placed his fingers on the strings. He didn't strum. He didn't hurry. He simply breathed. This time, instead of freezing like he usually did, he closed his eyes and let his fingers move lightly. Not a full song, just small sounds, tiny attempts. At first, his hand shook. The strings buzzed awkwardly, but he didn't stop. He kept going. Every shaky note was a small step forward. It's like learning to walk again. By the afternoon, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: ease. Not mastery, not perfection, but ease. The fear that usually sat in his chest had softened, and that softness gave him room to try more. That evening, he received a call from one of the people who had attended the small gathering. The man's voice was warm and excited as he said, "Hey, some of us are meeting again next week. We'd love for you to come play something with us." He almost said no immediately. His old instinct told him to hide, to protect himself from embarrassment. But before the words could slip out, he took a breath and said, "I'll see." He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. And that, for him, was progress. The next few days became slow but steady practice. He didn't force himself to play long sessions. He didn't push his limits aggressively. Instead, he played when he felt ready, stopped when he felt tired, and tried again later. Sometimes he only played a few minutes. Other times, he played for an hour without realizing it. His sound wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in a strange way, that honesty made him feel more connected to the instrument than he had in years. One night, while sitting outside under the quiet sky, he thought about the gathering again. He imagined himself sitting in a small circle, people waiting for him to play. The thought scared him, but it also made him curious. What if he could play just a little more than one note this time? Not a full performance. Just something small. He closed his eyes and pictured himself strumming a simple pattern, the kind he used to play long ago. The memory felt distant, but familiar, like a childhood smell that suddenly returns. The next morning, he decided to practice that simple pattern. His fingers stumbled at first, like feet stepping on uneven ground, but he didn't let frustration take over. He reminded himself of the look on people's faces that night, the disbelief not from shock, but from admiration. They weren't expecting perfection from him. They were simply amazed that he found courage. He practiced the pattern again, and again. Slowly, the sound became smoother. The notes flowed more naturally. He even felt his shoulders relax. Later that week, he went to the gathering again. The moment he entered the small room, everyone smiled warmly. There was no pressure in their eyes, no expectation, just genuine kindness. One of them laughed softly and said, "We're just happy you came." He felt his heart settle a bit. He sat down, placing his guitar on his lap, telling himself he didn't have to prove anything. He only had to try. The group played a few songs together, taking turns sharing simple melodies. When they encouraged him to join, he didn't freeze like before. His hands trembled slightly, but he lifted the guitar and rested his fingers on the strings. He didn't aim for something big. He didn't push himself to perform perfectly. He simply played the small pattern he practiced over the week. The sound was gentle, almost hesitant, but it carried something beautiful. Honesty and growth. The room grew quiet as he played. Not the awkward kind of silence, but the kind that comes from people paying close attention. When he finished, the group didn't erupt into loud excitement. Instead, they gave him something better or soft. Warm applause. "You're getting it," someone said with a smile. He felt his eyes sting for a moment, not from sadness, but from relief. That applause wasn't for a perfect performance. It was for his courage, his progress, and his ability to push past fear. After the gathering, he walked home with a light feeling in his chest. Like the weight he carried for years had loosened even more. He kept replaying the gentle applause in his mind, letting it settle into his memory like a seed that might grow later. The next morning, he woke up with a new routine. Instead of staring at his guitar in doubt, he picked it up with a small smile. Practice no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a quiet promise he made to himself. As the days passed, he noticed changes not only in his playing, but in the way he carried himself. He walked a little taller, spoke a little clearer, and breathed a little deeper. People around him noticed too. Without him realizing it, the simple act of trying again had started shifting every part of his life. One evening, he sat on his porch and tried playing something new, a soft tune he used to love many years ago. His fingers weren't perfect, but they moved with more confidence now. As the melody slowly came together, he felt a sense of completeness, like a missing part of him was returning. He didn't think about fear anymore. He didn't think about failure. He just played. And for the first time in a long time, the music felt like his own again. That night, he realized something important. The one note he played that changed everything wasn't a miracle or a lucky moment. It was simply a beginning. A small start that carried more power than he ever expected. Now, he was ready for what came next, even if he didn't know exactly what that would be. All he knew was that he wasn't afraid to try again, and that small courage was enough to move him forward. The days that followed brought a quiet peace he had not known in years. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't feel like a sudden victory or a moment of glory. Instead, it felt like calm waves moving through his life, changing things slowly and softly. He woke up every morning feeling lighter, as if something inside him had finally found a sense of direction. He kept practicing his guitar, not because he felt pressure to improve, but because he enjoyed it again. The instrument no longer looked like a reminder of failure. It looked like a friend he had reunited with after a long time apart. Each time he touched the strings, he felt a small spark of happiness. Sometimes he made mistakes, and the notes sounded uneven or unclear. But he didn't get upset. He simply paused, tried again, and kept going. That simple act of not giving up had become his quiet strength. One afternoon, he received another message from the group he had been spending time with. They told him they were planning a small event, a relaxed evening where anyone could share a song, a melody, or even just a moment of sound. It wasn't a formal performance. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was simply meant to bring people together. They asked if he wanted to join. This time he didn't hesitate. He typed, "I'll be there," and sent the message before doubt had a chance to whisper in his ear. In the days leading up to the event, he thought a lot about what he wanted to play. He didn't want to prepare something complicated. He didn't want to pressure himself into performing a full song. Instead, he wanted to play something that felt true to him, something that reflected his journey over the past weeks. He experimented with different sounds, mixing simple notes and soft patterns. Some nights he played only a few minutes before putting the guitar down. Other nights he played longer, losing track of time as the melody slowly shaped itself. The evening of the event arrived with a gentle breeze, a sky filled with fading colors. He walked to the small venue, a warm, cozy room with soft lights and a few chairs arranged in a loose circle. People greeted him with genuine smiles, making him feel welcome the moment he stepped inside. The atmosphere was calm and friendly. Some people chatted quietly, others tuned their instruments or warmed up their voices. There was no tension, no competition, no expectation. When it was his turn to share something, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. He held his guitar gently and sat down, letting his hands rest on the strings. For a moment, he felt a familiar flutter of fear, an echo of the nervousness he used to feel. But unlike before, this fear didn't overpower him. It was just a passing feeling. He looked around the room. Everyone's eyes were soft, patient, and encouraging. They weren't waiting to judge him. They were waiting to listen. He started with the simple pattern he had practiced. The notes were soft, flowing slowly like a quiet river. Then he added the small melody he had been shaping over the past few days. The sound wasn't perfect, but it carried feeling, warmth, and honesty. As he continued playing, something unexpected happened. He felt himself relax completely. His fingers moved with steady ease, and the melody grew more confident. It felt like the music was speaking for him, telling a story of trying, failing, trying again, and finally finding peace. The room went completely silent. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was full of attention, full of presence. Everyone was listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. When he reached the last note, he let it ring softly in the air. It lingered for a moment before fading into the quiet room. The group didn't cheer loudly. Instead, they gave him something far more meaningful: long, warm, heartfelt applause. The kind that shows not excitement, but deep respect. He lowered his guitar and felt something inside him loosen even more. It was relief, joy, and acceptance, all mixed into one. One person said softly, "That was beautiful." Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He smiled, not a forced smile, not a nervous smile, but a smile born from genuine gratitude. After the event, several people came to talk to him. They asked how long he had been playing, what inspired him, and what he wanted to work on next. They didn't treat him like someone who struggled. They treated him like a musician, like someone with a story worth hearing. Walking home that night, he looked up at the sky and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not pride in being great, but pride in not giving up. The next morning, he didn't even think twice before picking up his guitar. It had become part of his day, part of who he was again. He sat by the window where sunlight fell gently across the room and played the same melody he shared at the event. It felt even smoother now. More natural. He realized something important while playing this journey wasn't about one moment or one note. It wasn't about proving anything to others. It was about rediscovering a part of himself he had ignored for too long. The one note that changed everything wasn't magic. It didn't transform his life instantly. What it did was open a door. A small door that he was brave enough to step through. And from that moment on, every step he took made a difference. He thought back to the version of himself who used to be afraid of playing in front of anyone. The person who doubted every sound he made. The person who believed he wasn't good enough. That person still existed somewhere within him. But he no longer controlled his life. Now there was a new version of him, one who tried, one who learned, one who grew. He promised himself something simple: to keep going. No matter how slow, no matter how uncertain, no matter how small the progress, the music wasn't just music anymore. It was healing. It was courage. It was growth. Days turned into weeks, and his confidence continued to grow. He met with the group more often, sometimes just to sit with them, sometimes to play along. He even helped another beginner who was struggling with fear. He shared his own story quietly, and it helped the person smile and try again. One afternoon, while practicing, he realized something that made him stop for a moment. He wasn't thinking about fear at all. He wasn't thinking about mistakes or expectations. He was simply playing. That quiet realization filled him with warmth. The journey he began with one note had now become something bigger, a part of his life that made him feel alive, connected, and hopeful. He knew he would still have days where doubt would whisper in his mind. He knew not every performance would go smoothly, but he also knew something stronger now. He had the courage to keep trying, and that courage was enough. He gently rested the guitar beside him and leaned back, letting the soft light of the afternoon fill the room. He felt at peace, truly at peace. The one note he played long ago, the one that surprised everyone, had changed him in a way he never expected. Not by making him a great musician, but by helping him believe in himself again. And as he sat there, breathing quietly, he understood one final truth: sometimes all it takes is a single note to open a new chapter in someone's life, and he had finally stepped into his.